It's back to school time. Are you smiling? Are your kids smiling? Good morning, sunshine, right? So I know back to school can be an anxiety-provoking time, not only for our kids, but for ourselves, right? So we are going to use this time today in our live show for your questions. And this is totally your agenda. So welcome if you're joining us live or on the replay. Post your back to school questions in the comments so we can answer them live today. We do have a couple questions that came in before, but I want to see. Hey, MC is here with us. If you are live, what your questions are. So let me know. Good morning, or actually it's afternoon right now for us, right? So while you are typing in your questions for today, I'm going to go ahead and respond to a couple that we already had come in and make sure. Hey, Tony. So yes, Tony had asked some questions before. So I want to go to your questions, Tony. So let's bring those up here. So I think this was your first one. Tony says, the school continues to keep my child in a social skills class and refuses to write social skills goals. This year, they want to exclude her from an elective she really wants to attend because it conflicts with social skills class. Is there no reason classes cannot be split and she can attend both? So, Tony, that is a great question because as our kids get older and they're at the school level, let me see if I can bring your question down. When they're at the school level where they start getting electives, we don't want our kids to miss out on those because those can be the most positive time of the school day, right? Because usually we want our kids to be in electives of things they're interested in. It's like one period out of the school day where it can be less of a struggle. They can feel more positive about themselves. So we want your daughter to be able to attend an elective class. The problem that I would see with splitting the class, like go part-time to the social skills group and then the second half of the elective class or vice versa. I'm not sure exactly how they're thinking of splitting that. The problem is you lose out on the other part and it just becomes real fragmented. And I think it also makes your daughter more like a visitor to the electives class versus a full class participant, right? So I would, if I were you, I would suggest, pushing back on the need for your daughter to have the social skills class, especially when there's no social skills goal and they're resistant for some reason to write one. So I think you can say, let's look at the IEP, let's look at her strengths and her needs. And I don't know what the IEP actually says, Tony, but if it doesn't address or point out any social skill needs, say, let's look at a more appropriate class that my daughter could be taking during that same time slot. So I would really look at trying to see if your daughter can be in there full time for the elective class. And MC says, if you knew what you know now, what would you change if you got a do-over? Ooh, that's a good question. So my son is an adult. So when I look back on school, as far as from preschool through, actually he went to audited classes in college. And what would I do differently? I That's a good question. I think, I don't know. I mean, I feel like a lot of the things that we did at the preschool and elementary school were right on, and things went well after we finally um, had mediation when Dylan was in preschool. But middle school, I think maybe what I would have done differently is to have been a better listener to the teachers and their concerns. Dylan came from being fully included in elementary school, and then middle school had a pretty, segregated practice of having kids with, intellectual disabilities being pretty much all day in a self-contained special ed room. And of course, that was not what we valued for Dylan or what he wanted. But I think I would have been a better listener with the teachers, because sometimes I think it's so hard emotionally. We get so kind of, I don't know if the word is entrapped, but so, kind of set as far as this is what I want, this is what my kid needs, this is what we're going to go for. And we don't allow time to really try to understand the other person's perspective. And I could have been more empathetic, I think, with teachers and, realizing that they needed support too. My husband and I would do lots of modifications for Dylan's homework or different assignments and send it to the school as far as examples of how things could be modified. So I think we were supportive in that way. And we had a good relationship with the special ed teacher who was providing some of those accommodations too. But yeah, I think being a better listener, I don't know. That's a great question. So I'll put it back to you. What would you do differently? Like you've already learned some lessons, right, from your kids, and especially looking at that transition in the fall of going back for a new school year. So what have you learned, and what tips could you share? Because the thing is, I host this show, but you have so many tips and good strategies. So the more that we interact and share that as a conversation, the more we all learn. So thanks for saying that or asking that. So let's go back to another question from Tony. And she says, let me make sure you can see that. She says, last year, the school placed my child in co-taught classes without my consent or knowledge. When questioned, they really didn't have a valid reason. She has a TBI, ADHD combined type anxiety, among other diagnoses. She was harassed by teachers and bullied by peers. Question for this year is, I'm sure I don't want her in classes supported by the special ed teachers. She has an IEP for reading, writing, which she got no support last year. She is required service minutes. So I think what they're trying to convey, if she is not in co-taught classes, she will not receive support. I'm so frustrated. I have not even answered the email. So, yeah, so you bring up lots of important points here, Tony, because we do want to have a real clear picture of what our kids are doing at school. And so usually it's like a table, a service grid in the IEP. Towards the end of the IEP where the service minutes are listed, it should also say a place. And so where those services are going to be provided. So check and see if it says general ed or resource room, or check and see how they describe that. Because if they didn't give you a description that these were going to be co-taught classes versus a smaller, more direct instruction group, that is something that you want to get clarified. Under that service grid in the IEP, then there's an optional statement of service delivery. And that should be a narrative that really explains what your child's school day is going to look like. So look at your current IEP, Tony, and if that all is pretty general in those areas, then I think you want to request an IEP meeting to amend it to clarify that. So, it should not be your only option is your daughter is in co-taught classes, right? Because that's a program and that's the model that they're trying to make your daughter fit into, versus what they're supposed to do, right, is to individualize it based on her needs. So I'm not sure exactly what you see for the areas of needs. And do you see those being able to be supported in a general ed class, or are you asking for more pull-out services? Now, the other point that you bring up about reading and writing supports weren't provided, that's something for sure we need to keep on top of. Because too much of the school year can go by before we notice things like that. So again, pull out that IEP, see what the service minutes are for reading and writing. Ask the staff, how are those going to be provided for your daughter? What days of the week, what times? They should know the periods of the day or the times that she's going to be receiving that support. And you might have some kind of a communication notebook or emails, system set up where, every couple of weeks you get some kind of a report on her progress in those areas of reading and writing. And you see if in fact she really is getting that time, because that's like a huge problem if there's time written in the IEP and they're not providing that for your daughter. So Tony, let me know if that makes sense, and if you have any other questions. But yeah, I think for sure you need to get that worked out, and there's no way that they can only give you the option of it's co-taught classes or nothing. I mean, that's like totally inappropriate, and they should not be able to get away with that kind of stuff. So Holly's with this. Hey, Holly. She says, having a good meeting at the end of the school year so that the beginning of the year is really planned out. So yeah, so that's one of the things that I think is a tip that has worked really well for a lot of parents, is to, even though your IEP may not be up to be, rewritten at the end of the year, it's still nice to have those closure meetings and to capture all the things that worked well. And so when that new year starts, you're starting on a positive foot. So thanks. I love that tip. Yes, having the new year planned out is like super, super important, right? And MC says, learning how to ask for data in a different way, not just subjective data. And that's her tip for us. So yes, and being able to understand the data. I mean, I think a lot of times parents are taught to, to say, show me the data. And sometimes, teachers will show, a bar graph or a line graph showing, the baseline data where your child is now. And it looks like really official, because there are different colored lines on the graph, they're dotted and all this kind of stuff. But that can be junk data. So even though it looks like it's objective data, it can still not mean very much. So being able to understand what the data means, what it really is showing you, is like super important. So that might be a show that that we want to have in the future, right? And then also being able to know, is this really objective or is it subjective? And the teachers are just basing it on like, I think he's been doing pretty good, and it doesn't really tell you much. So yeah, being able to ask for data, to be able to know what that data means. And sometimes it's just having a conversation with the teacher ahead of time before the IEP meeting to say, let's go over this data and let me ask, some questions so I understand it before we go into the meeting. And that saves some time. It also gives you time to hear the teacher's explanation and then go back and say, I want to learn a little bit more about this and make sure I really understand this. So that's a huge tip. And let's see, we have some, and Holly is saying minutes are direct service. Yeah. So if they have, 30 minutes a day for reading and writing, or 60 minutes a day for reading and writing, that's what your child needs to be getting. And if they're not, that's something that we want to find out sooner than later, right? And we need to correct that. And that usually calls for some face-to-face meetings with the staff. Hey, Mindy. Mindy's here, and she says, we have made our son's developmental therapist an integral part of his IEP team. She has worked with him for 5+ years. His first year of kindergarten, fully included, was very successful. Well, he'll repeat kindergarten this year. We developed a strong relationship with the school, and his DT, developmental therapist, is highly respected by the school. Our son is a first for the school to not be bussed elsewhere or pulled for time. So congratulations, Mindy. Isn't that wonderful? And that's what we want, right? Is we want to have those positive relationships and that teamwork, and to know that your outside provider is, thought of highly by the school staff is huge. So there's no defensiveness of the private provider says this, but there's actually this collaboration. So that's the ultimate model that we want. And so I'm just looking forward to hearing some reports back on how school's going to go. So Mindy, when's your son's first day of school? So that is so neat. And that he'll be fully included. And that makes a huge difference for the rest of his school years. I think once you establish that, this can work, and you can help show the school how to make inclusive education be a positive experience for all kids, then you have that track record to build on to say, in first grade, now we're going to, kind of replicate this model that we know works. So that's a huge thing. Thanks. How cool. So Tony says, I'm in the process of filing a state complaint due to the school withholding her services and not providing her service minutes. Yeah. And, sometimes that's where we have to go, right? Because if schools keep getting away with not providing the services that are written in the IEP, they'll keep getting away with it. I often say to parents, what we accept continues. So if we accept that the school is not going to really implement that IEP with fidelity, that's what's going to continue. So Tony, hopefully you'll get a good state complaint investigator who will look at it, and that you'll have the documentation to show the loss of service times. And then usually on your state complaint form, you can suggest a resolution. So, I think when in this kind of a situation, one of the things to request is compensatory education, where they make up for that lost time. And it's hard to make up minute for minute, because actually not having that can have a greater impact than just losing minute to minute. So sometimes parents will ask for additional time. If you figure out over the year how many hours she lost, sometimes you can add additional hours onto that, because that loss of time really impacts her in many ways. And then the trick is, when school starts, is how to figure out how that compensatory ed is going to be given. Is it going to be before, after school time? Is it going to be, a teacher coming to the home after school to make up that time? So yeah, good luck on that, because that's not appropriate for them to get away with that, right? Nikki, hey Nikki, how did start advocating for IEPs? So can you give me a little bit more information, Nikki? So is your child just being evaluated for special education and you're wanting your son or daughter to get an IEP, or do they already have an IEP and you're wondering about how to keep advocating for them? So just give me a little bit more information there, Nikki. MC says, yes, excellent. And then Holly was saying, the co-talk class. So when she was talking about minutes and service time, she was talking about the co-talk class. And Nikki is saying, absolutely. So Nikki, just give me a little bit more information so I can respond better. And let me go back, because I had a question that was sent in from a teacher. So let me pull that up. This is an educator's point of view. What if the cognitive, social, and emotional behaviors were such that the teacher felt that the learning needs of the student were best met in a SDC, I'm assuming that's a self-contained classroom? For instance, a student that even with a one-on-one para, behavior specialist, and other supports still wouldn't be able to fit into a general ed classroom. How would you address that? What would you want teachers to know? So I would love to hear, this is like covering up my face. Let me bring it down here. I would love for, as I'm answering, for you guys also to answer that. So to be honest, when I first read it, there's like things that stand out for me that I have my little red flag here that are red flags. And the concept of fitting in to general ed is like one of those red flags for me. Because I think if we use things like universal design for learning and that type of framework in all our classrooms, that it's not a matter of students fitting in order to be welcomed and accepted in a general ed classroom. And, it sounds like from this teacher's description that the student has a lot of different needs. The other thing that I would, if I was talking to this teacher, that I would want her or him to be able to also share what the student's strengths are. Because when I'm working with a team at schools and we're trying to figure out how to best support a student as they're included in the general ed curriculum, in the general ed classroom, I want us all to be thinking of what are ways that we can tap into their strengths and build on those. We also want to recognize their needs and their triggers for things, like if there's sensory triggers that are going to be happening. We want to be proactive and be thinking ahead of time, what can we do? Do we put this sensory diet in place so before the student has a meltdown, they have those sensory needs met? So, depending on, the student and what the specific strengths and needs are, we would develop a specific plan. And it just, I think as, sometimes when we think of students being fully included, we think that everyone has to be in that general ed classroom. And instead, what I would like to see our schools do is have alternative places where kids can go when they want some quiet downtime, but not have it be the special ed room where like the only ticket into getting calm and having quiet is an IEP and going to the special ed room. I look at places like the media center that's a quiet place usually in schools, in the library. And can there be some, study kind of rooms or study places where kids can go? And it's for every student, not just students on IEPs. That's where I think we need to expand our thinking, because there's other kids in the class too that might need some things changed. So instead of saying, this is our program, this is our curriculum, this is how I run my classroom, and if you don't fit into this box of a student, then I'm sorry, you can't be here. That's not what we want to be doing. And so, as challenging as it can be for some students, I think there's enough research to show that learning in the general ed classroom with all that exposure to the rich curriculum that happens and being next to peers makes a huge difference. And it's up to us as the adults to figure out how to make that happen. So sometimes it's calling in a consultant. Some districts have consultants that can come in and give advice. There are a lot of times state type of facilitators or consultants that your Department of Education has on contract, and they can come in and help give ideas and suggestions and coach the teacher. Because the reality is we're asking teachers to do something differently, and they need the training, but they also need the follow-up and the coaching so they can really deliver those types of inclusive supports. So I hope that helps the teacher that wrote that in. Let me see. So Mindy's got a great point. Thanks, Mindy. She says, the law does not require a student to fit in. Strength-based teaching, what speaks to your student? Patrick Schwartz gives some very usable techniques geared towards autism, but applicable for all. So yeah, thanks, Mindy. And, I've never heard Patrick Schwartz speak before, but I have read different articles, and I know he's co-authored some books with Paula Kluth, who also is a wonderful expert. So yeah, I can come back and post some links for some resources that both Patrick and Paula have for kids on the spectrum. And that might be something that would be helpful too. So thanks. See, this is why we need all of you, because we all have different experiences and we can share those. Let's see. Holly says, as a parent advocate for the district, to provide good professional education training so they are better educated to work with all students, good teaching practices, and being flexible is what it's all about. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, so, and the district needs to hear from teachers as far as what the priorities are for their professional development. Most likely the beginning of school, there's going to be a district-wide, meeting and kind of a gathering for all the staff in the district. And it's, to get everybody pumped up for a good year. But a lot of times they'll have a speaker there, and teachers need to have input on, into who, what kinds of information they feel like they need for their in-service times. And throughout the year, a lot of schools have early dismissals where in-service is provided to teachers. So again, encourage your child's teachers to speak up and say, we really want to learn some techniques and strategies that work for all students. And I would put in my vote for universal design for learning, because I think that is incredibly helpful for all teachers. And I do have a Facebook group that some of you guys are in, and I call it Universal Design for Inclusion. So if you want, you can join in over there too. And Nikki says, I feel like there needs more inclusion, needs to be more inclusion. Yeah, and that's part of what that IEP team needs to be talking about. And one of the things that I suggest to parents when I'm working as an advocate for their child is that you really build in your case for inclusion at the beginning of your meeting when you're talking about your students' strengths. You know, one of the things for our son Dylan was that he really models other kids' behavior and, you know, their skills. So when he sees other kids, you know, using the calculator to check their math work, he's like, oh, I could use the calculator too. So we put that in his IEP as a strength, that he models other students' behavior. And therefore, we wanted him in general ed where he would have a range of, you know, classmates that he could use as reference points as he continues to learn. And then in the needs section, to build your case for inclusion, you talk about that need for natural peer support and things like that. So you start building your case from the very beginning of your IEP meetings for inclusion. And then, you know, your goals are developed around there. And at the end of the meeting, when you get to service time, you're going to say, remember, we said, you know, he had a need to be with, you know, his classmates in the general ed room. We have a goal about him being in the reading group in second grade. Now, when we're looking at service time, we have to look at how we're going to bring those services and supports to the second grade classroom versus making him leave in order to get the support. So, Lissa, how are you? Lissa is from Idaho. Lissa, I haven't seen or heard from you in a while, so I hope things are going well. And your son is going to be making some transitions too for back to school. So let us know what questions you might have that you've kind of been pondering, right? Let me look down here to see. Oh, cool. So Nikki says, no, I have cerebral palsy myself, and I'm becoming an advocate for special needs. How you start advocating for IEPs. So Nikki, yeah, so if you're interested in helping other parents, I think that's terrific because in most places, there's a real need for more advocates. Some of the really, I think, wonderful trainings that you can get are from the Rights Law. They have a website, Rights Law, that you can go to, sign up for their free newsletter. Their website is just like packed full of wonderful information. And they also do trainings throughout the country. Nikki, I'm not sure where you're from, if you can let me know what state you're from. And you can look at the Rights Law website and see if there's going to be a training nearby you scheduled already for this next year, because that gives you some great basic knowledge of the kinds of information that you need to understand in order to help other parents as they're advocating. So that would be terrific. Another suggestion I have is that you could look into joining COPA, which is a national organization. It stands for Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates. And COPA has a listserv that's really good. You can go on and ask specific questions and get some suggestions. COPA also has a lot of webinar trainings and other trainings that you can attend. So yeah, I think just kind of developing your knowledge base of more about special education services and the rights that parents have would be excellent. And I also wanted to let you guys know that we have some back to school time slots open if you would like to get a free consult for 30 minutes. And, you know, sometimes I think parents are like afraid, like, what is she going to try to sell me? And I'm not. But I know not every parent can hire a special education advocate to help them. And so I do these weekly Facebook Live shows to provide free information for parents and teachers. And then also, I'm offering a free 30-minute phone consult. And that is just so, we can get everybody up and started to a great time for this new school year. And allow you to talk specifically with me about your situation, and I can give you some ideas of next steps that you can take. So if you're interested in doing that, just give me the word consult below and we can get you hooked up for that. So that's something that I wanted to offer to you guys too. Let's see if we have any other questions. So I keep looking down here so I can see the questions. So Tony has one. She says, what wording do I use in a state complaint, as I am rather sure my child is not the only one affected, and I want to fight for other children also. I am termed that parent because I'm the only parent that is outspoken and fights for my child's rights. Well, I know the feeling. And I actually have mugs and t-shirts that say, hello, my name is that parent. Because I want to take back the meaning of that parent to be something positive. So, Tony, I think it's great that you're that parent and that you're speaking up for your child's rights, and you want to also help other students. So if you want to file more of a group state complaint, you can do that if you have other parents that are willing to come forward and share their stories and also be named in that complaint. So you have to, let me see, I was going to see exactly what you said. So what wording would I use? You would have to have some kind of documentation that other students also have not had their service hours fulfilled. So if you know other parents at the school that you can talk to, or if you're in a local support group with other parents from your district, you could ask, has this happened to your child too? And then see if they would be willing to contact you and you could have a conversation with them. But you would need to be able to show that this is more than just your child. So, and that could be something, Tony, that we have a follow-up phone call with. So if you want to, book a time with me, that would work. But yeah, you would need to have some other parents come forward. And let me see what else. Okay, Nikki is from Cleveland, and I have good friends that live in Olmsted Falls, right there in Cleveland. And Mindy has a good suggestion. She says, Nikki, look for a governor's council for people with disabilities, partners in policy making in your state. Yeah, so that also is going to be starting, and the deadline might have passed for you to apply for that. But I know I attended when I was living in Colorado and Dylan was young, the Colorado Partners Program. And that is like an amazing, series of monthly trainings that you get. Also to look, each state has a developmental disabilities council. And a lot of times they're looking for board members. And that's like a wonderful way to network with people in the know and start learning a lot that way too. So yeah, there's lots of things like that. If there's local support groups in your community, go to those trainings, have conversations with parents. All of that is going to help get you out there where parents will know that you're available, and also help you just continue to learn more about the special ed process. So Mindy, that's cool. So Mindy, did you do the partners program in your state? Let us know. And Lissa, yay, I love the conversations. Thank you guys. Lissa says, Nikki, you can also start getting involved in advocacy with your local community parent-to-parent groups. In Washington, it's paved. They have IEP trainings and volunteer training available to support other parents. Just an idea. Yeah, and that's excellent advice too, Lissa. I know in Colorado, we had a really active parent-to-parent group. And then I was disappointed when I moved to Idaho and there's like no parent-to-parent group here. So look for your state if there's a parent-to-parent group. Then the other thing is the Parent Training and Information Center. And I can't remember what Ohio's is called. Yeah, it's paved in Washington State. And when I was in Colorado, I worked after I retired from teaching with Peak Parent Center, which is Colorado's training and information center. But they have lots of free resources too. So sometimes it's just knowing like which would be the great, places to start tapping into first. But thanks, Lisa. That's an excellent suggestion. MC says, love the mug. And didn't you win one in a giveaway and then you gave it to a friend? I was trying to remember, MC, if it was a mug that you won or something else. And so Tony said consult. Yes. So hopefully my IEP bot is answering you and then you just reply with consult. And you'll get the link for my online calendar and you can look at the online calendar and see what time and day would work best for you. I update my calendar every week because it changes every week, right? Depending on when I have IEP meetings and things like that I'm going to with families. But yeah, we'll get together, Tony, because that would be helpful just to have some more time to talk about that. And Lissa says, I love being that parent. And I have a new that parent mug too. This one says, hello, my name is that parent who believes inclusion elevates all. So there's a variety of that parent mugs that you guys can get. So what else do we have going on? Have any of you, I know we have one mom in our Trailblazer group, which is our monthly membership group, and her daughter started school today. So are your kids starting back already? Or I think it seems like most schools start in August, where, a long time ago when I was in school, it was more like after Labor Day. But so when do you guys go back to school? And what other questions do you have about that? And I'll scroll through here, get a drink. Let me know. Let me look through and make sure I'm not missing anybody's comments. Cool. I think we got them all. So let me tell you, next week, Thursday, we're going to have a guest. And she is going to be talking about not only being able to tell your child's story, but also to show that in pictures. So she has this wonderful technique of using photos, which we know, right, is like such an engaging way for people to, learn about our kids, but also with stories. And so many of us, work on like a one sheet about me kind of handout that we can give teachers at the beginning of the year. And our guest next Thursday at noon Mountain Time, is going to be sharing how you can kind of take that about me handout to another level and include both the photos that, speak 1,000 words, and some short kind of narratives that you can share with staff so they can understand your child better. I was just emailing a mom today, and, one of the things that we're talking about is her son is, transferring from an online school to a, public school. And that's a huge transition. And one of those fears is, how are we going to make sure that teachers know about your son's strengths and needs and, little tricks that work before school starts, when teachers don't have very many days back at work before the kids actually arrive. So that's always kind of a trick, is to be able to schedule some time ahead of the first day of school to touch base with teachers. So if you have any tips on that, that would be good. So Lissa says that she's not sure when school starts. She says, I'm dreading school starting. So Lissa is also one of our Trailblaze parents. So Lissa, let's connect over in our Trailblazer group so we can chat about that, because we know it's really hard, and I don't want you to be dreading that school year, even though the reality is that's how we feel a lot of times, right? Lisa says, I'm enjoying having my son home now and putting off dealing with school to the very last minute. But I don't know. I'm a little worried about that. Because I think there's some good, easy kinds of things that we can put in place now before school starts. And the benefits will be there, and it will be a smoother transition. So, Lisa, let's talk, because I want to make sure things go smoothly for your son this year, because I know it's going to be a big transition for him. So thank you for being here with us live, or if you're watching the replay, make sure that you know that you can always come back and ask questions, because I'll be checking back. If you would like a free 30-minute phone consult, you can just give me the word consult below, and we can get that set up for you, so you can get even some more individual time with me, so we can be proactive and make it smooth sailing into the new year, right? So thanks for being with us, and we shall see you next Thursday at noon Mountain Time. I'm Charmaine Tanner. You guys take care, and we are wishing